Okay, back to the poem. This will be line 301 to 314. Then he spake the words which follow, and expressed his thoughts in this wise. Aid me, moon, and sun release me, and the great bear lend his counsel. Through the portal that I know not, through the unaccustomed passage, from the little nest that holds me, from a dwelling place so narrow, to the land conduct the roamer, to the open air conduct me, to behold the moon in heaven, and the splendor of the sunlight. See the great bear's stars above me, and the shining stars in heaven.
Well, that's a pretty epic way for, I guess, first words for Väinämöinen in the Kalevala. He's basically begging to be released into the world so that he can roam. And I couldn't help but wonder if they weren't drawing some parallels to like actual birth in this, where they're talking about the unaccustomed passage, the little nest that holds me being like the womb, a dwelling place so narrow. Like when I was reading, I'm like, geez, this sounds like poetically biological. And I love him asking the moon and the sun, the great bear. So he's talking about these, well, I guess heavenly bodies, these astronomical things that help people orient themselves in the world. So with the moon and the sun, you can tell time by them. You know what time of day it is, what time of night it is, when it's going to be night, and you have to sort of go hide from animals, that kind of thing. And then the Great Bear is sort of the very famous constellation Ursa Major. And oddly enough, it's one of the most important constellations like throughout the world. And for some reason, almost every other culture who recognizes Ursa Major and has it in their night sky relates it to a bear. And that to me is also weird. And, like why would that happen? And the importance of it is that you would navigate, like if you're in a ship, and I think we do see Väinämöinen piloting boats later on in other stories. It's you would do that by stars, and like it was super important for the captain to be able to read the stars in the night sky so that he could pilot at night with nothing else to sort of guide his light. And there's actually sort of a long tradition of ideas, specifically in the West, about like stargazing and navigation. And in Plato's Republic, Socrates talks about how captains of a ship or pilots of a ship, it would be considered that they had mastered their craft or their art if they could pilot by stars, because it was just so important. But it's also, if you don't know how to do it, it's kind of mysterious. But it was so important because it oriented you, in the vastness of the ocean. So it literally gave you guidance in chaos. And so, like, Socrates would talk about stargazing, and there were two types that he distinguished. There's the useless stargazing, where you just look up into the sky and kind of admire it, and you might even be able to see what you're looking at and how it orients you in the world. But if you don't do anything with that knowledge, then what good is it? That's why the piloting the boat it's sort of the perfect amalgamation of the art of sailing and the knowledge of stars and where you are in the universe. And that, I mean, that's what most of this is. That's what religions are. That's what philosophies are. It's supposed to put you in the world so that you know how the world works and how you're going to interact with it. So I think it's really incredible. One that, I'm talking about Socrates and Plato, like ancient Greece type stuff. But, on the other side of the Eurasian continent, we've got, this happening as well, where stargazing is also, I would assume, seen as something great because, he's mentioning the constellation by name and how once he's able to see it, he'll know where he is and he's in the world and he knows where to go from there. So I thought that was, it's just a great introduction to Väinämöinen.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think you're exactly right where it's like, this is definitely about birth and it's semi-biological, at least to the furthest point of where they're willing to go poetically. And then it's like, yeah, there's something too. He wants to see the moon and the sun and the stars, right? Like he wants to look upward, he wants to have his head uplifted and his sight on the highest good, something like that, right? Like that's a symbol that we see all over the place, right?
Oh, definitely. From stories like Pinocchio, like the movie, or I think even like Wishing on a Star, like it's that idea that that what you want in life will come from aiming to the highest good that you can find.
Exactly. And that's kind of everywhere, right? And here it is. But then, let's go explore the Great Bear a little bit, because this is just one of the coolest things. And in Finnish mythology, it is just so huge. So yeah, you want to talk more about the Great Bear?
Yes, I'm definitely ready to talk more about the Great Bear. It'll probably freak me out.
Well, the idea of the Great Bear here, we are going to have one poem of the Kalevala, Runo 46, is specifically dedicated to the bear cult, and we're going to have a fun time with that one. So stick around with us for another couple hundred episodes or something like that, and we'll actually get there. But just to give a kind of high level overview of like what this is. So the bear cult in general, worldwide, and I can go into some specifics, but worldwide is associated with one of the oldest forms of religion in prehistory. Mircea Eliade gives it a name, essentially the worship of the Lord of Wild Beasts, which is this figure that is supposedly in charge of the hunt, in charge of allowing us, humanity, to be able to effectively hunt these creatures that are used for meat, for their furs, for loads of things that were hugely important for human life. Like, that's a major source of human development, is that we started to eat meat and cook it. Importantly, those two things together were like, boom, the human brain just exploded because of those innovations, right? So hunting was one of the original things. And if you understand, hunting came well before agriculture. And in fact, the understanding of time and the seasons was known well before agriculture and before we understood the concept of, the cycle of having to put seed in the ground, wait a long while, and then it eventually comes up with things you can eat. Before that, you had hunting, and that was, between that hunting and gathering, that was how you got your meal, and it was often infrequent for this real big game. And the bear, this is like the king of the forest. It's like the big one. You don't mess with it on your own. Absolutely not. You go and take it on as a group, and it was really considered like the highest being that you could, entangle with, right? Because, you can die if you have an encounter with a bear. Even today, for the most part, if you run across a bear and you don't deal with that situation very, very precisely and carefully, you could die. Well, you could die even if you're as careful as possible too, right? If you're in a bad situation to begin with. But I guess the lesson is don't be in that bad situation. But anyway, I digress. So here, the concept of the bear, and Dan, you already hit on, like, this constellation as well is already assimilated to the bear, but the bear was used in sacrifices the world over. An example that's commonly listed is the Ainu people from northern Japan, Hokkaido, I believe it, as well as the Sakhalin Islands to the north, which is half Japan, half Russia. And the people there would have a super elaborate ritual to do with the bear, where it involves ritually killing it in a state where it's not actually like it's not sleeping. They're actively attacking the bear, sort of thing. They go drag it back to camp, skin it, and then they have this big major feast with it. And and I think with the Ainu, it might even be alive at the time, and then they shoot arrows into it or something or the dead body or something like that. I'm blurring the details. I know you've read.
Yeah, I think with the Ainu, they actually had bear cubs that they raised in the lap of luxury until they were old enough to sort of, I guess, sacrifice in the ritual. And I mean, it sounds kind of mean, but reading about it, they coddled and loved these bears and then it was almost like they were setting it free to bear heaven, kind of thing.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. That is the huge point here, where by the end of all of this, after this feast, they would bury the bones of the bear or take it back to its cave, sort of thing, with the implication that the Lord of Wild Beasts is going to resurrect it or allow its soul to go back into it. So yeah, I mean, it sounds cruel, but very much so. It was supposed to be the continuance of this natural thing. And that's really what's important, is that it's the continuance of the cycle. And maybe a deeper point here is it's a continuance of the cycle before agriculture. And that is huge, because cyclical time, in a lot of ways, became solidified because of agriculture, because of the cycle of ground and the earth and life and death and all that was seen on a yearly basis with agriculture. But at the same time, before that, you had hunting. You had this hunting culture where, you don't want to kill all the bears to death. You want to kill a bear and then respectfully give it its space so that more bears will still be there, sort of thing. The point was that not to exhaust the resource. And that was the symbol of worshiping I think that's the correct term. Worshiping the Lord of Wild Beasts here is to say, okay, we're hunting this beast, this amazing, powerful, deadly beast, bear, what have you, but we also don't mean to be we're killing this forever. We want it to come back so that, one, it can continue to have its good life that it naturally has, but two, we can hunt it again. So,
yeah, part of a lot of the rituals in various places also included a song of sorrow or apology, and just sort of kind of explaining that they didn't want to kill all of them, that that they were both part of the same cycle, and that's what it was, and that they weren't. Killing the bear wasn't frivolous. It wasn't for sport. It was because that's kind of the circle of life, and that it had to be done. But at the same time, we know what you need for your species to keep going on. We want to live in relationship. Right?
Yeah.
And just to talk about, I think we've lost that hugely in the West. I don't think there's. I think that's way out of whack.
Agreed. And that whole concept was in the implication of the skull and the long bones of the animal, I don't know the technical terms, the arms and the legs being left in a cave somewhere unbroken. The implication is that they're sacrificing the best marrow, and usually the implication as well is that the brain, which is fatty and nutrient dense, the tribe isn't eating that. They're sacrificing it back to the Lord of Wild Beasts to say, here's the best bits. It's not like we don't want it, but we want to also just continue to have bears available. So, and I mean that like, this isn't just to say that the bear was only seen for hunting. Like it was a symbol of power. It was like the deadliest thing around. Like it could kill you if there's a bear on the loose. I mean, even today, if there's like a problem bear out in the wilderness that's like coming into contact with humans regularly and is no longer afraid, like unfortunately, the solution is to put it down because it's going to kill someone eventually.
Definitely. They're also a sign of like fertility because you often would see like the mother bear with her cubs. So, you know, and there's usually, you know, one or two, like, I don't know. It's definitely a powerful symbol. And if you might ask yourself like, well, why the bear? But if you've actually ever seen a bear up close, they are actually majestic creatures. And in a lot of cases, we'd be talking about like cave bears, which are bigger than most of the bears we have today. And I mean, they're terrifying animals. I remember being in a national park and seeing a bear, you know, sort of wandering around eating stuff by the side of the road. Not garbage. It was like just eating whatever bears eat. I think they eat whatever they want. But some guy had gotten out of his car and to take a picture, and he got closer to the bear than he was to his own car. And I just remember thinking like, okay, you're dead. If this bear decides that you're dead because you're not going to make it back to your car because they're deceptively fast. And then like one swipe and you're on the ground. Like you can't fight a bear barehanded.
No, that's crazy. That's actually like at worst, that's ignorance. No, at best that's that's what I meant. At best that's ignorance because that's like, no, you don't tempt that. And that's almost the whole point of all this. The bear being this most powerful thing. It's like, I do not think you would see someone from a culture like this who respected and I think loved is not even too harsh, like too strong of a word here. Loved the bear as well, almost essentially the same level as a god would go and tempt it like that.
Absolutely, because we see in the cultures that were like raising the bears from being cubs, like they were treated very well and basically pampered until it was time for the sacrifice. Otherwise, if they were going out and hunting, they went in a huge party. And then when they went into the cave, they woke the bear up. Like it'd be a lot easier to kill the bear while it's sleeping. But no, they were showing it that respect that, you know, here's the kind of, you've got a chance to do some damage and maybe escape. And I'm sure that like there were hunts where, you know, people didn't come back.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, just to bring this all back in here, because we've been talking sort of more about a bear cult abstractly, but on the level of the Finnic peoples in general, like this was central to their mythology and they had similar rituals as well. And I believe one of the main aspects of this is they would have sort of a ritual marriage as well, which is sort of to merge the spirit of the bear with that of the tribe and things like that. So I mean, this was central to their mythology. And so the great bear being mentioned with the sun and the moon, like these are the two main things for telling time, right? But then the bear is also there as not only the symbol of the stars, but also like just the symbol of the bear, which is just central. And there's a Finnish, I don't know what you would call him, I guess sort of mythologist or something like that, named Juha Pentikäinen, and he wants to go through the existing corpus of Finnish poems, which the Kalevala, again, is only a small fraction, and they have tons of these available in their archives, and he wants to collect essentially a new Kalevala, which is centered around the bear. And this is really all just to say that you can take the bear symbolism and compare it to like the creation of the world from the perspective of the creation of the bear, all the way down to all the cycles of the world as being through the lens of this being a bear cult, for lack of a better term. And it's just really to emphasize that for the Finnish peoples here, this was like their thing. The bear was their symbol. Yeah,
like according to this gentleman, if you're to take out or sort of filter out the Christianity that Elias put into it, you would actually end up with sort of something that looked like a bear cult. So
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I believe it was something like 2015 was the last I saw anything published about this. But yeah, if Mr. Pentikainen comes out with his bear version of the Kalevala, yeah, that's next on our list. Absolutely,
Definitely.
So no, just to say here, I mean, this is an introduction to a massive symbol, and really, like when we get to number 46. Oh man, like that's going to be a cool time. That's going to be so much fun, that particular verse. So, it's going to take a long time, but it's going to be worth it. I think it's the story that I'm currently most looking forward to, but that's probably just because I've been reading about bears and stuff all last week. So,
Definitely.
But yeah, there we go. Väinämöinen wants to be born, see the sun, moon, and the great bear.